What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Happy Friday. Made it to the end of another week. And this is a video I've been talking about putting up for a little while now. Kept pushing it back, mostly because things kind of kept happening. We kept getting news. I kept doing other videos. But I wanted to make sure I got this out before the end of this week. So here it is. I want to talk a little bit about this defensive line in particular, because that seems to be the big problem right now for these Seahawks. And I wanted to make sure I made this video because I want to try to be very clear about what the issue is in a game when things don't go well. You want to make sure you find the right place to put criticism. You don't want to just assume that this bad thing happened, it has to be this thing because it's been that thing before. No. So one thing that this defense has done this year that hasn't made any sense to me and hasn't worked would be the two-man fronts. The Seahawks have run a decent number of two-man fronts this year where they basically have two down linemen, two outside linebackers who are playing up on the line, but they're standing up. They're on the, it's almost like it's like a wide nine. We've talked a little bit about this before. You guys know it's a defensive set that is designed to create maximum pressure on the quarterback, which, by the way, wasn't working that well anyway, and it leaves you very vulnerable against the run. Well, we really struggled to stop the run for a good chunk of the year, and one of the big things that people like me and the Hawks Nest have been talking about this year was you can't use two-man fronts in neutral downs. Smart teams, smart offenses are just going to audible right to a run, and GG. Good luck stopping the run when you have two down linemen. So this game 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay, I saw it come back. We took a little while off from it. There were a couple games there where it seemed like we only busted it out in obvious passing situations, and it worked well. But in the Tampa Bay game, we saw it in neutral down situations again, and it didn't work. We didn't stop the run at all. So that was one thing I said. We need to learn our lesson here. So this last game against the Raiders, we have our worst run defense, maybe in team history. Gave up a ridiculous number of rushing yards to Josh Jacobs. So you would assume, oh, we didn't learn our lesson. We must have used a bunch of two-man fronts against the Raiders on neutral downs, and Josh Jacobs tore it up. No. And I wanted to grab the screenshots just to prove it, just to kind of illustrate the point here. So I took some screenshots from the game on Sunday against the Raiders, and there are just 7 of them, so we'll get through this real quick. There are just 7. These are basically pre-snap, right before the snap, on 7 plays where the Raiders had a successful running play, where they give the ball to their running back, and the running back has a successful play running the ball between the tackles. Those specific criteria. The quarterback hands the ball to the running back, and the running back picks up good yardage running between the tackles. Obviously, what makes a play successful is subjective. It could be like a 6-yard run. That's a good run, right? But in other situations, a 6-yard run isn't necessarily successful. Sometimes it's like 3rd and 20, and you're just running the ball to try to basically get the play over with and just send out the punt unit. Then a 6-yard run doesn't really mean anything. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. A 4-yard run on 3rd and 3, definitely successful. So with that in mind, I basically wanted to take a look at most, maybe even all, of the Raiders' successful running plays between the tackles against the Seahawks. Here's the first one. This one was on the first or second drive of the game for the Raiders. One guy's hiding a little bit behind Bruce Irvin, but you can see there are 3 down linemen here. This play ended up being like a 7-yard rush, I think, for Jacobs. It wasn't a huge play or anything, but it was a successful run against a 3-man defensive line. This is the next play I want to show. This was another successful run for the Raiders. This was actually their touchdown. This was the 30-yard Josh Jacobs touchdown run right after the Geno interception. I see 3 down linemen. You've got your 2 outside linebackers here, Irvin and Nwosu, but then you've got 3 down linemen, clearly. and the Raiders had no problem running on it. Okay, this is the next one. This was another run play. It didn't go for a massive gain, I believe, but it was a successful running play to Josh Jacobs. And again, I'm seeing 3 down linemen over the ball, down with their hands in the dirt too, just like the way you would typically see in a 3-4 defense. And you can see the outside linebackers as well. It's a normal alignment. Okay, here's another one. This one's right before, or right as the ball is being snapped on another run play that I believe went for, I think this one went for like 20 yards. And you can see there's Irvin, there's Mafe, and then you have your 3 down linemen between them. 3 men, not 2. It's 3. Okay, then we have this play. This one's from midway through the third quarter here. This ended up being like I think a first down run. Ended up being more than 10 yards. Irvin, Mafe, 3 down linemen again. So you guys are seeing what I'm trying to put out there, right? Like these plays I'm highlighting, that's most of the runs we're talking about here, where the Raiders ran the ball with their running back, traditional running play between the tackles, and had success. These are not on 2-man fronts. I actually found a couple of plays where we had 2-man fronts where we actually did stop the run, ironically. Here's another one. This was in overtime. This was the first overtime possession that ended in the missed field goal for the Raiders, where I think Jacobs busted a play over midfield. It was a 15-yard pickup, I think. Mafe, I think that's Nwosu, and 3 down linemen. So this is not an issue of the scheme is bad or the coaches are bad or they put the wrong players out there. No. This is a formation where you would expect to be able to stop the run. You can see Barton here. You got Brooks here. Ryan Neal in the box. Like, the whole party's here, man. The party is here, ready to stop the run, and the run doesn't get stopped. And here's, of course, the big one. This is the final play of the game, the 86-yard touchdown run by Josh Jacobs. Irvin, Nwosu, Brooks, Barton, and 3 down linemen. And the reason why I'm trying to highlight this is to make sure it's understood. 2-man fronts were not the reason why we couldn't stop the run. It's not the reason why we lost this game. We didn't see that many 2-man fronts in this game, and honestly, when we did, it was mostly appropriate. When they did run against the 2-man fronts, ironically, they didn't have success. So this week, we got to look a different way. We got to look at this from a different angle. I mean, as long as we're going to be sitting here critiquing things that this team is doing, I'd love to be able to say, hey, that's all it is. You fix that, you're good. Just get another man on the defensive line, stop these 2 down linemen fronts, and everything will be okay. But clearly that's not the case. So my unfortunate conclusion, and the reason why this is so unfortunate, is because there's no way to fix this right now. We are in week 13 of the NFL season. We have only 6 games left. There's no trade deadline. That's long past. There aren't going to be big-time guys in free agency you can get. It's just you've got to go with what you have. But the bottom line is this. The defensive line that we have is not that good. The players just aren't that talented. And I don't think this is a shock to anybody. But what this illustrates is that there's no easy fix here. It's not just about, oh, get one more man on the defensive line and everything's going to be okay. No, everything is not going to be okay because at the end of the day, even when you put these guys in the right position, they're not great. If you look at PFF here real quick, just to illustrate that point, we got 2 guys that are rated well by Pro Football Focus so far this year. We've got Shelby Harris, and Shelby Harris is the guy who I believe is the one really good player on this defensive line. If every single Seahawks defensive lineman got released into free agency this week, just like all at once for some reason, Shelby Harris is the guy who would get jumped on very quickly. I like Shelby Harris. I think he's a good player. Good against the run, applies some pressure in the passing game, does a good job taking up some attention. He's not having his best year, but he is also getting a little bit older, so that's not shocking. He's 31 now. But Shelby Harris is a good player. I do believe that. I do buy Shelby Harris being a plus defensive lineman for this team. And then you have Al Woods. He's the other guy on this defensive line who is good. He's graded well by PFF again, like he pretty much always is. Good against the run, actually supplying a little bit of a pass rush, according to PFF this year. But Al Woods is also getting older. He can't play as much as he used to. I think so far this year he's averaged like 25 snaps a game. So he's out there for like maybe 40% of the game at most. When Shelby Harris, the difference is when he's healthy, he's able to play probably 60 to 70% of the game. So that's the key difference there. Al Woods, if he got released from the Seahawks this week, I think somebody would pick him up, but there wouldn't be some massive rush to get him because everyone would know what he is. Al Woods is a rotational player. He'll give you, honestly, ideally, you'd probably play him about 30% of the snaps. 30% of the snaps, he can give you something real nice. But after that, you can see why this is a problem, right? Like Poona Ford. I mean, I gave Poona Ford a little bit of a shout out for being one of the more impactful defensive players against the Raiders. And I like Poona, but he's not right for this defense, and that's becoming pretty clear. PFF has generally always liked Poona, to my knowledge. So far this year, they have him graded at not even average. They have him hovering around that area between replacement level and average. So Poona Ford not getting it done. So that's one of the guys who is playing a lot of snaps for you. You can go look at my snap charts to see how much he plays. And according to PFF, he's not even really average. Quentin Jefferson, another guy eating up a ton of snaps for this defense. And PFF will tell you he's straight bad. Atrocious against the run. Not good against the pass either, but no matter how you slice it, this is a very, very subpar, not even really replacement level player. Maybe he's replacement level or some tiny scrap above it. And this is a guy who you're playing a lot this year. In most games, he's playing more than half the game. That wears on you eventually. When you have a guy playing more than half the game on your defensive line who is this bad against the run, that's what happens. Brian Monet extended him in the offseason, and I'll talk more about that kind of stuff in a second here, but yeah, barely above replacement level. Not good against the run, even though that should be what Brian Monet is all about. I mean, the dude weighs 365. The dude is huge. The dude's 27. He should be in his prime, but he's not really providing that much. I think he's had that one game against the Cardinals where he rushed the passer really well, but PFF doesn't like him, and watching the games seems relatively invisible to me. LJ Collier, now these guys haven't played that much, like Collier and this next guy haven't played that much, but regardless, LJ Collier, bad, below replacement level. Miles Adams, probably a little better than replacement level, but not by much. Again, another miserable run grade, by the way. LJ Collier, even worse. So that's kind of what I just want to put out there with this video. Make sure it's understood that the coaches can only do so much. The scheme can only do so much. The unfortunate reality here is that these defensive linemen, they're just not very good at football. And there's nothing you can do about that right now. So I think things are going to get better than they were against the Raiders because that was the worst ever. It was about one of the worst run defense games you can ever have. You're playing a team with one really good receiver and a running back on a bad calf, and he still does that. That's an all-timer. So it'll be better than that. But looking at it right now, I don't see how we can reasonably expect it to ever become good again. I don't know what happened that 1 month. That 1 month we shut down James Conner pretty well. We shut down Saquon Barkley. We shut down Austin Eckler for the most part, to my recollection. I think those were the guys. I don't know what happened in those games. I don't. But when I look at what happened before and I look at what's happening now, these guys, they're not that good at football. Shelby Harris is good. Al Woods is good in moderation. Everyone else, I don't think any of them are actually good. Maybe Poona Ford would be good if you put him back in his original role of being like a one-tech in a 4-3. Poona Ford, if he went to the right team, would probably be a good player again. I'll give him that. But on this team, in this system, it doesn't work. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to accept that to a certain extent. We need to accept that this defense it's not going to get too much. It's not going to ever get great because we just have a lack of talent up front. Some people are going to say we should go back to the old defense to help Poona Ford out. You could put Poona Ford back at 1 tech, and that would probably suit him better. Maybe. I would argue that would hurt Shelby Harris, who I think is your best defensive lineman, because he's always been a 3-4 guy. So I look at that and I go, I don't like that trade-off that much. By the way, you'd also hurt Boye Mafe. He is a pure 3-4 outside linebacker. I also think, honestly, you'd be hurting Nwosu and Irvin. Those guys are best suited for a 3-4, in my opinion. So I think you're stuck in this defense. And here's the thing that I want to just put out there before I end this video. Miles Adams, the guy on the screen right now, this guy, Miles Adams is just some guy that's on your team, basically, right? Like, I know some people are excited about him, some people like him, and I mean, I like him well enough too, but he's undrafted. He was picked up by the Panthers and immediately let go. You picked him up because you needed a dude on the practice squad. Now he's promoted. There are guys like this floating around the league. There are 100 Miles Adamses out there probably. So that's whatever, but while I understand that this year is going to be a little bit of a transition from the old to the new, and I understand things were never going to be great, and I get the struggles to an extent, what I want to say is that the other guys on this defensive line were guys coveted by this organization. Shelby Harris, I mean, you traded for him. I know that was part of a much bigger trade that had way more going on in it than just Shelby Harris. But you did trade for him. Al Woods, you re-signed him. You gave him a contract a couple years ago. He played good for you. You gave him another contract last year. So you coveted Al Woods. I know it's not a lot of money, but you didn't have to re-sign him, but you did because you liked him. Now, Shelby Harris and Al Woods are good, so that's fine. But what about these other guys? Poona Ford was a guy you gave a second contract to. I understand you were playing the 4-3 then, though. Okay, that's fine. You were playing the 4-3 when you gave Poona Ford that money, and he was doing really well in that system. Honestly, he wasn't terrible last year either. He was actually pretty decent, I think. So, okay, I understand that, but I can say the same thing about Quentin Jefferson. You signed him out of free agency last year, or this year, earlier this year. So Quentin Jefferson, he's not just some random guy you picked up off the street and said, go out there and play 50 snaps a game. No, you coveted him enough to sign him in free agency. You extended Brian Monet before the year. You gave him $12 million. Now, he'll never see any of that because he's going to get cut because he barely even plays. But you still coveted him. And LJ Collier, I don't even have to say it, first-round pick. You guys know, we definitely coveted him. So mistakes have been made. So I just want to say that while there is somewhat of a pass you give this team for being so weak up front, this defensive line being so mediocre, there is definitely some aspect of you messed up here. Like Quentin Jefferson was somebody you brought in to be a part of this new defense. Now, I understand that sometimes you have to go get substandard pieces or not the best cuts of meat when you're trying to do something new and there's only so many options out there, but Quentin Jefferson has barely been edible. Like, Quentin Jefferson, like, you're digesting it and it wants to come right back up. Not even close. So there's only so far I can go with that kind of stuff. You didn't have to extend Monet. Now, I know there was a little funky thing this offseason where he had been in the league 3 years. He was entering his 4th year. There was some weird stuff going on with the contract where if you could have kept him on the tender, I think, for another year, but it would have been considered kind of a, I don't know how you would say this, kind of a dirtbag thing to do. So you felt obligated to not have him play on the restricted tag. But still, if that's the case, then let him go. Unless you're actually going to use him. That's the thing with Monet, by the way. Yes, he is kind of playing bad. Feels like he hasn't played nearly enough this year, given how much money you gave him. You clearly liked him. Or else why would you give him that money? So, I don't know. The decision-making on this defensive line, even with how we utilize it, does occasionally mystify me. But either way, there's no way Monet was worth that extension. So these guys, they're just not good at football. Well, the first 2 guys are. This guy might be good if you put him in the right spot. The 1 tech 4-3. But yeah, these guys, they're just not going to be good enough, and it's not necessarily going to get better this year. So a little bit of a black pill this morning, I guess. Let me know what you guys think. Go Hawks. And yeah, just understand that there is no 1-800 defensive lineman that you can call this late in the season. There's nothing you can really do about it. You can hope the guys you have start playing a little bit better. But Quentin Jefferson, he's been in the league a while. He's in or just leaving his physical prime, and he is what he is at this point. Brian Monet is 27. He is what he is at this point. LJ Collier is 27. Is what he is at this point. Like, we don't have a superstar first-round rookie here that's just getting his feet underneath him and is about ready to start wrecking the league now that we're getting late in the year. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. And, yeah, black-pilling y'all a little bit this morning, but it had to be said. Sometimes it's just the players. Just like when Noah Fant blew the chip block that got Geno killed by Crosby on our last offensive play of overtime against the Raiders. The coaches, the scheme, that stuff worked, but Noah Fant actually has to execute the block. Sometimes it's the players.